Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about The Babysitter, Killer Queen. Before we begin, let me know in the comments if you were looking forward to this or what your thoughts are if you've seen it already, and make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these reviews. It helps me out immensely if you do that. Also, if you're new here and you like movies, whether it be blockbusters, hidden gems, or everything in between, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases and some classics. But anyway, let's jump right into it. This takes place 2 years after the original film and finds Cole, once again played by Judah Lewis, still dealing with the trauma of the last movie's events. However, he finds that no one believes him when he tells them what happened, other than his best friend Melanie, once again played by Emily Alyn Lind. Cole and Melanie go away for a weekend with a few friends, only to find that members of the cult from the last movie have somehow returned and are out for revenge. I was not expecting this to happen. In fact, I didn't even know there was going to be a sequel to The Babysitter until the very end of last month when I was checking out what was on the horizon for this month. But I got immediately excited. I just did a review for the first movie, and I'll leave a link to it in the description in case you missed it, but I absolutely love the first Babysitter. It's just a silly, over-the-top, bloody film that doesn't take itself seriously and isn't expecting you to either. I think it's one of the most underrated Netflix movies, so I was immediately on board with this. Though I'd be lying if I said I didn't have at least some reservations. This is once again directed by McG, who also directed the first movie, but this time Brian Duffield, who wrote the first film, didn't return for this. I'm not sure why, but instead McG himself co-wrote this with 3 other screenwriters. So I was a little nervous, especially since, to be perfectly honest, I'm not really the biggest fan of McG's films other than the first Babysitter. But luckily, while this isn't as strong as the first movie, it's still worth checking out. Once again, this is another bloody, over-the-top good time that ups the stakes, ups the amount of characters, and opens the environment up a bit. While the first movie took place almost exclusively in one house, this now partially takes place in the woods, on a beach, in the ocean, they're on boats, they're in a cabin at one point. This is moving all around. And once again, if you like comically bloody violence or splatter humor, you'll enjoy this. The film makes use of practical effects, most of which are actually pretty good, to give us gory kills, a lot of which are played for laughs. And it'll still be pretty creative with its setups. It still retains that sort of Home Alone feel that the last movie had. And it embraces all these ridiculous setups and wants you to just have a good time with it. You'll even hear rock music blasting in the background during a really high tension moment, so that way it really adds to the excitement. There are also multiple callbacks to the first movie to let you know the spirit of it is still there. Like, the first few scenes here are structured very similarly to those of the first movie. We once again get big, bold text whenever Cole reacts to something. Some of the jokes here will specifically reference jokes from the first movie, and the cast members are all clearly having a great time with it. Judah Lewis is once again solid here as Cole. He's given a little more to do this time around as he's dealing a lot with the trauma from the first film's events. He and Emily Alyn Lind are the two who play it the most deadpan though. They have their funny moments, but they're the two most serious members of the cast. Still, they manage to have their fun. As do a lot of the returning cast members. Andrew Bachelor, Bella Thorne, Robbie Amell, and Hana Mae Lee all return as the cult members back from the dead, and it's like they haven't missed a beat from the first film. Their dynamic is still hilarious. They get into these little petty arguments over the littlest things, so they were a lot of fun. And Ken Marino, who plays Cole's dad, also has a much bigger role this time around than he did in the first film. And he'll play like this typical overly concerned dad role, constantly worried about Cole. It's a little cliched, but he has some fun jokes of his own that I liked. The biggest standout by far though was Jenna Ortega, who plays a new girl in school named Phoebe that also ends up on this weekend trip with everyone else, and ends up teaming up with Cole to take on the cult. She goes just as big as the cult members. She's extremely funny, her presence was always strong, she has a pretty solid backstory, and her chemistry with the rest of the cast was on point. Despite being new to the franchise, she fits right in almost seamlessly. Now, as I mentioned, I still had a great time with it, but it's nowhere near as strong as the first movie. The first film ran at a very quick, almost non-stop 85 minutes. This runs for 100 minutes, and there are a couple of times where you can feel that runtime. Some of the jokes don't land as well. There are exchanges that kind of get dragged out a bit longer than they should. Like, a few times there will be a chase scene with just one of the cult members, and while I was rooting for Cole and Phoebe, there were times where the cult member in question clearly had them, and they'll instead either toy with them or draw out the chase a little longer. And it felt like there was no reason for them to do that other than the fact that the movie would have been over had they killed them right then and there. So they'll conveniently not do anything, and then Cole and Phoebe will get the upper hand a minute later. There's also a character arc that I won't spoil for you as the trailers didn't reveal it, but it takes a sudden turn that I didn't particularly care for. The acting during this arc was fine, it's just the fact that given everything we saw with this character up until a certain point, it just felt a little forced for me. The motivations weren't totally clear other than a very quick line of dialogue, and it was just a little disappointing. And I wasn't the biggest fan of the third act. Going back to what I was saying about things conveniently happening, it felt a little predictable and things will almost perfectly fall into place for some of the characters. And the way it handles the final 10 to 15 minutes, you can kind of see it coming a mile away. And it's also the most serious part of the movie. This will have a number of moments that kind of break from the first movie's full-on goofy sense of humor and kind of take itself a little too serious, but that's especially apparent in the ending. It didn't ruin anything for for me, it's still a decent third act, and the characters are still cracking jokes and still having fun with it the entire time. It just didn't go out with as much of a bang as it would like you to think. Overall, like the first movie, this was a nice surprise. It may not be as strong as the first film, as sometimes it drags things out a little longer than it should have, and it will be a little more serious than it needed to be, but it's still a lot of fun in the end. The cast had an absolute blast with this, the jokes are hilarious, and it's full of bloody, over-the-top comic violence that's in the spirit of the first film. If you were a fan of the first movie, I think you'll enjoy this as well. The Babysitter, Killer Queen gets a 7.5 out of 10. I don't know if there was supposed to be a third film. Given how we surprisingly got this, I'm not totally counting it out. I haven't heard anything, but we'll see. In the meantime, I'm next going to have a review of I'm Thinking of Anythings, along with my ranking of Christopher Nolan's movies and my continuation of reviewing each of the X-Men movies. So if you're a fan of any of those, stay tuned for that and much more coming soon. So let me know, did you see The Babysitter Killer Queen, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you enjoy it more than the first film, less than the first film, and what were some movies that exceeded your expectations? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.